Hey, this is Meg Messmer, and you are watching the TV Writer Podcast.
So I want to tell you a little bit about our main sponsor for the episode. Script Anatomy is a screenwriting school that gets incredible results. In just 4 years, their students have won 58 fellowships, half of them at major studios. In 2020 alone, Script Anatomy won 4 out of 11 fellowships at CBS and 3 out of 8 at Warner Brothers. Why? Because the instructors are all working writers with current credits. They teach a consistent, tool-based program, and they treat students like emerging professionals. To get your writing career started, go to scriptanatomy.com. Well, my name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, episode 119 for November 9th, 2021. And I'm so excited to bring you someone that I haven't been able to bring before, which is a multi-hyphenate. We're going to find out what a multi-hyphenate is and also why you would want to be one. A multi-hyphenate writer, actor, and producer, Meg Messmer. How are you doing, Meg?
Hey, everybody. Wow, I'm so excited. I'm on 119. This feels so like special.
Yeah, it's a cool number. And you are currently in North Carolina?
Yep, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, making a movie.
Very, very cool. And you have done a whole pile of different things by design. And I want to make that clear that as we talk about your career, this is really what you want to do. And I really want to introduce this to people as something that is a viable choice. And so before we get to sort of the current where you are, I want to find out how you got started and how it led up to this point. So teenager, what did you want to do?
Oh, wow. Teenager. Sure. I think when I was in high school, finally, I think my junior year, I decided that I always had wanted to do acting, but didn't really go after it. I was more into sports. And then my junior year, decided to do some theater. I was good at it. I loved it. And then told my parents that I wanted to go to school for theater and acting. And so they tried to, well, not they, my dad said I should be an accountant, but then they gave in. I got some scholarships, went to college in Detroit for acting. I went to Los Angeles for a semester, like a summer, to check it out. I went to NYU in New York for a summer and studied at Tisch. And then when I graduated, moved to New York, where I started acting or trying to book jobs in New York, which was very, very hard.
But you did act in quite a few projects.
No, I did. Before I left Detroit, I should say, like I got my equity card right away. They kind of discovered me at a workshop and cast me in a Mitch Albom play, like right at the Detroit Radio City Music Hall or whatever. That's not what it's called. That's New York. Whatever that one is in Detroit. And then when I went to New York, I did a movie right before I left Detroit, and I was starring in it. And so when I got to New York, I was like, hey, here I am. And then, nobody was biting. And so I was like, wow, this is hard, And so I started working at a theater, an off-Broadway theater, and meeting a lot of writers and people in the industry. And my mom kept saying, you got to get on stage. You got to get on stage. So I got with a girl, and we said to each other, let's produce a play that we can star in. And so we commissioned some writers to write a play for us, and we put it up in New York. And those writers that wrote for us in those years, they were just out of Juilliard, but they are now famous executive producers and showrunners of TV shows and film and Pulitzer Prize winning playwrights. So it was a good catch and a good first project out. And that was kind of the first project out where I realized that, like, I was producing, but I didn't even know that I was producing, but I was actually pretty good at it.
Very cool. And so from there, where did that lead?
So from there, I had been in New York probably almost 4 years at the time, and realized that I wasn't happy in New York, that I wanted to do more film. And I was seeing the trend of that most people getting booked on Broadway were actually film stars. And so I was like, well, I gotta go do some film. And I had loved LA when I went. So I packed up, moved to LA, and decided I didn't want to be a waitress. I mean, I was waitressing, but I was like, gosh, I want to use my brain. I want to be in this industry. I want to really immerse myself. So I interned at a independent reality producer's house. I interned at Disney, Mandeville Films at Disney and Paramount. And I never went to film school. So I was like learning the behind the scenes, learning what development. And right after I had finished those 3 jobs and got basically fired from my waitressing job, I got hired at a reality show company, Fremantle Media, which does like the big shiny floor shows.
Good,
American Idol.
Good company.
Yeah, great company to sort of cut my teeth, like learning TV, because everything was moving so fast. I was seeing all kinds of things come across my desk, like huge legal documents, but also budgets, and just really getting an education in it. And so they also offered money for you to further your education. So I ended up going to night school at UCLA for the producers program and sort of learning more about that. And then from there, from Fremantle, I went and I got another job in management. I went to go work at a top tier management company and got to learn at Fremantle. I say I was on the buying side of television shows, essentially. And at Untitled, I was working on the selling side using, we were repping writers, directors, and actors. And so I would see that side of things, which was really, really great. Really, really great as an actor to like be behind the scenes in a management company and see how that relationship was built and worked. So, and then right after the management company, I was still acting the whole time. And I started booking so much work or having so many auditions that I had to quit because I couldn't do my job properly, couldn't do both. And right as I quit, I booked 2 huge national commercials and then also got pregnant and then decided, oh my God, no, now I couldn't go out for I could go out, but not a lot of pregnant roles in commercials. And that's when I got my first offer to produce my first film. So everything just kind of happened in an essay. And I should say, because this is important for your audience, that while I was working in management and I had been to the UCLA producers program, I was hustling my ass off. I was, every night I had meetings. I was reading content. I was deciding that I was going to produce on the side. I was producing things on my weekends, like making shorts, making pilots, making sizzles. I was writing. And so the reason I got that movie, that someone offered me a movie to produce, was because they saw my hustle and was like, I know you can do this, and I'm going to ask you to come produce this film. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Well,
awesome.
I really appreciate you filling in the blanks there, because I think often you'll see in the trades that this happened, or you'll hear about a person picking up this project and it seems like, wow, overnight success. But yet it wasn't an overnight success. You've been building all along the way and learning all along the way and hustling. And I listened to a bunch of other podcasts, and I was interested in the Happier in Hollywood podcast. They were talking about, here's 2 very well-established writers, and they're talking about how even in television writing, they're saying that it's very important to always have a side hustle of some kind.
Wow.
And you'd think, the television writers has always been known as a very lucrative field, but yet it's also a field of lots of ups and downs, and you can never predict what's going to happen. And so that type of side hustle that you're doing, whether the hustle be networking, whether hustle being producing or whatever, it's always important that you have something going on after 5 or 6 o'clock when you get off work.
Well, and I just think that yes, it's a hustle, but I also am a pure believer in like having a balanced life. And I think that, like you have to think of it less, at least for me in my years of doing this, like I think about it less as a hustle and more of I just always want to be creating. I just always want to be in motion. And so for me, whether it's like right now, I'm working on a film, learning a ton on this film. Just before this, I was producing my own and show running my own series. And then coming up, I have a pilot that I have to finish and get it ready to pitch. So and that's all. Yes, it's a hustle and it's a lot of work, but it's also really fun and nourishing for me to be able to do that. And I think that if you choose this business, that's what you're signing up for, you know?
Yeah, and especially I think there's big differences between, say, for instance, how the industry was 15, 20 years ago and today. And 20 years ago, the prevailing wisdom is you either get an assistant job somewhere, maybe in an agency, or if you're lucky on a production, or you get into a writing fellowship and you work your way onto
Sure.
being on a staff, and then that's the path.
And then you're set. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then you're set. And first of all, streaming, they may not even have a showrunner. They may be smaller staffs. They may be very unbalanced. You might have lots of high level writers and not many low level. You might have lots of low level writers and not many high. And there's just a whole bunch of different changes that have been happening in the industry. And then I also think about this generation that's coming up. There was a study done a couple of years ago, and the younger generation, their celebrities are YouTube stars. Like the younger generation was asked who their most important celebrities were, and it wasn't the film stars and it wasn't the television stars. It was the YouTube stars. And so to this younger generation that's coming up, the shorter form content, the web content, the indie produced content is just as or more viable than the big shows. So talk a little bit about this series that you were doing in Atlanta, and how it came about, how you produced it. I was really actually impressed by the fact that you had a full writer's room for this series that you were producing by yourself. Tell me all about that.
Sure. The impetus of that started in LA. Well, okay, so my full adult life, so my show is called Intersection, and it stems from my experience of being a gentrifier. Mm-hmm. And like my entire adult life, I've lived in Detroit, New York, all over New York in gentrifying areas, LA, and then Atlanta, and really been a gentrifier in every single one of those cities. And so I started, once I had moved to LA, started really questioning what that meant to be, what gentrification even was. Like I really just didn't even know what it was or conceptualize it. So anyway, I move into Atlanta and I move into a historically Black neighborhood, and I start being like, all right, this is a story, and it can't just be told from my perspective as a white gentrifier. So I really wanted to build a writer's room around it. So we built, it's all women. It's a female-led writer's room, and cool. It has diverse. So we have 2 Black women and 3 white women in there. And we started writing this and we wrote probably for a year. And then we were about to make it March of 2020 and we got shut down. Wow. Then all of the madness of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter, sort of resurgence of that whole thing, and just all of those things, we kind of, and COVID, obviously, we looked at our scripts and we were like, these ain't gonna cut it anymore. And so we literally back to our writer's room and rewrote for another, it was basically a year.
Wow.
No. When did I shoot this? Yeah, it was a year. So we basically shot it in March of 2021.
Wow.
We have 6 episode web series. They're about 7 minutes each. We finished it. We submitted it to the Sundance episodic lab or episodic thing. That was sort of it was a nice deadline to have. I'll have other festivals and things I want to submit it for Emmy consideration because, like you said, short form is on the up and up. They've created a category for short forms at the Emmys, and that was sort of our goal when we went into this. Was sort of we're like, oh, we could make this for YouTube, and then I started thinking like when we found out about the short form Emmy, I just said, yeah, let's get an Emmy. Let's make this good enough to win an Emmy. And that's what we really did. We set out with, we did a Seed and Spark campaign. What we didn't make, like I self-funded. Our crew was over 80% female and BIPOC. We made this like beautiful story. We shot like over 6 days, 6 episodes. It was probably like 60 pages. It was insane. 60 pages.
60 pages in 6 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
With 4 different directors. I directed 2. My friend Charlie, who was also the DP, directed 2. Avery directed 1, and Alicia directed 1. So 4 because I really wanted to make it an experience, like a TV show experience, and have those different voices on the series.
Wow.
So it was intense, but it was super fun and worth it, And
tell me a little bit more about how you funded it.
We did a Seed and Spark campaign, and we made just under 10 grand on that. And the series, this is crazy. This is how good of a producer I am. I made it for probably 12.
Wow.
12 to 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was calling in a lot of favors. That was people donating time and things like that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people believed in the subject matter. The actors worked for free. We did do SAG, but we did their, I can't remember what it's called. It's like they have a new agreement out right now that basically allows you to, because we couldn't do all the protocols of SAG right now with COVID. Basically, same protocols are for like short form and Marvel movies. So they have this new, they have this new version that you can do. And we were safe. We tested people but we couldn't do it like the way they wanted us to. So we went under the radar with this one small agreement. Yeah. And that's it. And then we haven't released it yet. I think coming up, we'll probably release it early next year. If it doesn't screen at a festival, and then I'll probably have like a big campaign around sharing it, because the whole purpose of it was to start conversation. We want to do like maybe a coffee shop tour, to talk about like gentrification. We have our Instagram page, which is @gentrification the show. And we sort of post things about gentrification in general as a subject matter and issue that really is so rooted in racism. So,
well, tell me a best case scenario. Like where would you see this going? How would you see releasing it and monetizing it?
Absolutely. So, I guess a great goal would be to get an executive producer attached. So we'll basically pitch the series to people that we think could sign on and really get behind it, and then try to sell the show as a TV show, and then get it picked up and make it for FX or HBO or somewhere, Netflix.
And in terms of, let's just say it doesn't get picked up, but these 6 episodes that you shot, how would you see releasing them and making your money back on them?
That's a good question. I've thought about it, but I want to be super strategic before I get to that point. And I think, Amazon is a place where you can post series that you can charge something for. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure how or if I want to monetize it that way. I think like the purpose for this one particularly is the more eyeballs, the better. I think the people that wrote this, I think the people that made this and acted in this, I think visibility is really a major goal for us, like to be seen as writers. So in terms of the monetization of it, selling the show would be great, but really it was more of a calling card of like our work. But I still will not try to monetize it as a producer. That's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I think we may have skipped a little bit. Was that sort of between LA and that? Was there anything else that we missed, or was that sort of the next thing after leaving LA? Because you had spent some time in Sweden, right?
Yeah, I live in Sweden now. So
you live in Sweden, and that's a big commute.
yeah, it is. Let me think. So after I did my first movie, I worked with the same guy sort of as my partner for another film that was a big film that I produced in Puerto Rico. And then I moved to Atlanta after that. And then I worked with sort of my production team that I work with now that I'm working on this movie with. Made a lot of friends in Atlanta, have a great community in Atlanta. And that's my team that I sort of work with now. We also developed together, my partner and I have a show that we are pitching. And yeah, then 3 months ago or so now, this summer, my husband got a job. He works in video games in Sweden. And so my family and I upped and moved to Sweden. But the thing with COVID that it taught so many people was that you can live in anywhere and still work as a writer. Like I'm in a writers group, and several of the people in my writers group are writers assistants or staff writers, and they it's over Zoom.
Wow.
And pitching over Zoom, and actually one of those writers told me about her friend who moved to Sweden, and it wasn't until she moved to Sweden that she got staffed on a show.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. I think that's a really good insight is that I give people is you should live where you can be happy, first of all, as a human, and then where you feel creative. Because when I moved out of LA to Atlanta, it was the first place that I felt space enough to really be creative. Because in LA, it was just go, go, go all the time. Same with New York, go, go, go all the time. You're always hustling. And Atlanta, I got a little breathing room to write and to create like my work. So
yeah, well, and I think I mean, definitely we've heard a lot that you have to move to LA, you have to move to LA. But I think it's also that's wisdom that's come out of this old framework, and sort of the new way of doing things, especially if you have a low overhead. If you can produce something for $12,000, like if you shoot a movie for $150 million, then you have to use traditional methods and you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get that money back. But if you shoot for $12,000, you can choose to make it a calling card, and I mean that's technically you could have done that on a credit card.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and definitely for people coming up, it's all about what, especially as you come up, like, what is your brand in a sense? Like, and when I say brand, I mean, like, what's the story you want to tell? Like, what are the films you want to work on? A lot of things that I work on have a mission to them, have like a mission-based message. And that's just like the reason for me that I like to do my art. Not everybody's like that. Like, they love Marvel movies, and Marvel movies definitely have a place in the world for entertainment and turning off that brain. But like, I sort of chose, those kinds of things. So
very cool. And I think that the story really has to drive it. And it's something I tell my daughter. She's studying TV writing at USC, but
Mm.
she's the type of person that she'll write a novella. She'll write a series of poems. She'll write a feature. She'll write a TV pilot. Like she has all kinds of ideas, and not every idea is suited to the same genre or suited to the same medium.
Yeah.
And I think we've had this way of I like everybody
In.
encourages you to pick a lane and stay in that lane, but for a storyteller, especially if you even a really prolific storyteller, maybe it's a novel that's the best way to tell the story that has been driving you. Maybe it could only live as a sonnet. Maybe it could only live as a reality show.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of advantages to having an open mind in terms of how these stories can be told.
Well, you've just made a nice segue for me in terms of being a multi-hyphenate because, like, yes, your daughter has that multi-hyphenate view of the storytelling, right? So, like, they could say, oh, you should be a poet and stay in that lane. But, and sort of, this is sort of like in my life, I realized that I was pretty good at producing and acting and writing. And so, it's been a process to like figure out that I can do all those things at different times. And that's okay, because for all of my life, people are like, what are you? And you got to stay here. And I think that there's some truth to that you should be focusing at any given time on something and really put time into that. But for me, like, I'm actually so happy. I mean, show running, that show, Intersection, was some of my favorite. It was like my favorite thing that I've ever done. Showrunner has her hands in every single part of what's happening. And so for me, I was like, wow, this is a really great way to use all of my talents in a place. So as a multi-hyphenate, I was like, oh, this is excellent.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of very successful producer actors. There's a lot of very successful producer writers. And I think that we can have a little bit more of an open mind in terms of the lanes that we pick. I think it's more about how you sell yourself. It's more about the brand that you have. And if you walk into a meeting saying this person might be looking for a producer actor, you don't have to mention the other stuff that you do. Or if you walk into a meeting and you know that you want to focus on your show running, you don't necessarily have to mention a lot of the other stuff you do. You have to just pick how you sell yourself in that meeting.
Sure. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but it's funny. Just on this movie, like somebody pulled me aside and they're like, you have producer actress on your signature in your email, and this is an old Hollywood guy. Let me just say that he's an old Hollywood guy. And he says, people aren't going to take you seriously. And I was like, I did think about that, but also screw them. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not in a place in my career, like I am those things. I've worked, before I moved to Sweden, I was making over $100,000 a year as an actor, like, in commercials. So like, yes, I do that. And I also am making I'm making money producing my own stuff or producing this movie or whatever. So like you said, I think it's this narrative of what some people are used to. And then, I'm not ashamed to come into a room. And also in this film that I'm working on now, I'm helping to produce it, but they knew I was an actor. So they're like, hey, will you come do this role at the reading? And I was like, yeah, cool. Let me do that. That's super fun. I can do that. So I don't know, like I used to be kind of ashamed to tell people that I was an actor for a while because I felt like everybody was always like, oh yeah, and I'm an actor. But I'm like, no, I actually am. And I work in both and that's what I do. So.
Very, very cool. Well, so tell me about what's cooking. So what's coming up and where would you see yourself in a year or two, 5 years?
Yeah, releasing my series, definitely. I have another series that I did a podcast surrounding. So my partner and I have a show that we're pitching right now. And we have a podcast that we built for it. So it's based on a historical World War II female combat pilots. And so we have this podcast that we did called the Night Witches Podcast. You can find it on Instagram. And we're building our TV. Well, we have a TV deck pitch that we've been sending out along with this podcast. And it's amazing stuff. Like it's so, I can't wait to make this a TV show. And I got accepted into a co-production accelerator program next year for that series. So I'm excited to see where that will lead. And I think you mentioned something earlier that I never touched on that I thought was interesting. And you said, like, the way that you get into this business, is you do this and then you get this job and then this job. And I still think that, so much of the business is putting yourself out there, like making stuff, but also lots of my friends who are writers are constantly submitting their work to festivals and like this accelerated program that I applied to. And then that's how your work gets seen. And that's how people start to see your name come up over and over, like, oh, they won this award. Okay, let me read this script. So yeah, I'm trying to think what else I have coming up. We'll probably have a couple more movies next year coming up with my team here. And yeah, those are that's kind of my focus right now.
Yeah. So tell me, your advice to somebody who's starting out. First of all, could you be a multi-hyphenate like you are without having gone to film school or to university? Do you think you need to go to university, or is that a disadvantage to rack up this pile of debt?
I don't know. I never thought about it that way. I definitely think you can be a producer or in this business without film school. I am that person. Yes, I went to the UCLA producers program like later because I was so curious about all the different facets of producing. And it was like this really quick 3-month program where I got to learn about every aspect of producing. And I was like, okay, I think I like this one the best. But you can do that just by working on films. You can do that by, asking questions and getting on set and finding what you like and sort of zeroing in on that and working towards it. But I don't think film school is a terrible waste of time. I mean, I don't know. I never went, but like, I'm sure you learn a lot. I'm sure you know probably more than I do about camera gear. Like I'm, working on this film as a production supervisor, and my best boy's like, I need all this gear. And I'm like, I don't even know what these things are, but those are things that I continually get to learn about every time I'm on set as I sort of clock it.
And you were sharing that a lot of the jobs that you were doing, you were learning different aspects of the industry.
All the time. Every job I have, and you should never be afraid to ask questions, especially if you actually are going to take it in and learn. What other advice would I give to people? Just get out there and make stuff. Make stuff that you want to see made. Make stuff that is coming from you. Don't just make a horror because you think it might sell. Like, make a horror because you love horror, because that will really be true when you go to show someone. And then if you make a horror, like, that's now part of your work, and that's what people will start seeing you as. So that's why, like, it was so important to me to make something like Intersection, because I was like, this is the stuff I want to continually make. So that's my advice to people is, be in motion.
Like a shark.
Yeah.
Sharks can only breathe when they're moving.
So did you just call me a shark? I'm a shark.
Well, and also just a little bit more than that. I think you really, because I've connected with a lot of different people through the podcast, through Twitter and stuff. A lot of people do web series, but I can honestly say this is the first time I've heard of somebody running a web series just like a TV writer's room, like with an actual writer's room, showrunner, and that kind of thing. Talk about why that's an advantage in terms of short form content.
The very first pilot I produced was after I thought I knew how a pilot in the professional world was produced. And I said to myself, I want to do this the way they do it because I want to like experience that or whatever. And that's sort of how I felt, I guess, about this series, was that I was like, all right, let's see having a writer's room and having different voices and having people that are stronger in certain, my writers, Moretta, Jenica, Karen, and Jacinta, like all of them coming from different, like they all had these different beautiful talents that they were adding to the room. And I mean, obviously it elevated the whole series. And that is by far the advantage to having a writer's room. And then the rest of it, I think just for me, it was super important to have multiple voices on this particular show. I don't think every show is built like that. I think you can have just, you write every single episode, but, especially having different directors on these. And I just wanted to create an experience that was true to life. And, I guess that was super important to me.
Very cool. Well, we'll start to wrap things up here. But as we wrap up, what would you say if you were to talk to, say, 18-year-old self or early college self that now that might help that person be more directed to success?
Yeah, I'm a very impatient person. So when I first started out, like, I think I mentioned this, but I just was like, why am I not famous? Why am I not famous yet? And I think what that did, especially when I was in New York, was I got some really amazing opportunities that I didn't appreciate. And I think I would probably tell myself to slow down and like really like, so I tell people this often, but you just never know when something is going to come back. Like even when I was a waitress, I have a whole blog about how being a waitress taught me how to be a good producer, because you're multitasking and you're anticipating people's needs, and you never know when a skill set that you're learning that you think you don't want. I worked in development at an off-Broadway theater, and I did not appreciate that time because I was like, I'm an actor. I don't even want to, I don't really want to be here. I just want to be acting. But like that, in terms of the scope of my life, was a really amazing experience. Especially because I learned, I was helping to write nonprofit letters, or sorry, like what are those called? Like letters to get money for our nonprofit. And that's a skill set. It's like you're pitching, you're meeting all these people that have lots of money. And I'm like, man, I did not appreciate like what I was actually soaking in at that place, I think, the way I did. So that's my advice, is to myself anyways, to, slow down, take it in, get everything you can out of just where you are at the time. And know that it's going to come back and somehow it's going to be helpful to you in your career. And that might just be because you meet somebody that ends up being your partner later, or you have a story that, maybe you're in a hellish job and you use that to write a screenplay later, So yeah, that's my advice.
Very cool. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. And also, you mentioned the people too. I mean, the people that you worked with at that time now are showrunners and big producers and things like that. I don't imagine at the time you thought they were going to be that.
Well, I didn't. I was so focused on myself, and so because I still speak to some of them, or I still can email them, but it wasn't like I invested in those relationships as much as I could have. But yeah, I mean, what a crazy experience they were just graduating from Juilliard at the time. And now we're all working in the business. So
yeah, very, very cool. Well, I think we'll end it here, but share all your social media info. You're at Meg Messmer, and that's Instagram, and it's also megmessmer.com is your website.
Yep.
And Twitter is Megan Messmer.
I think it might be, but I'm not usually on Twitter.
Cool. Well, I'll post all the links on the show description notes.
Cool. Great. I have one more thing. I just recently started a Facebook group called the Multi-Hyphenate Creative Community. And that's been a really fun place that I've started to populate in and sort of share insight and share some stories around. So that's a cool place to find me too.
Very cool. I will post all those links, and if you want to learn more about your fellow multi-hyphenates, or if you want to be a multi-hyphenate, check that out. But thanks so much, Meg, for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
And best luck to you in all these projects. And hey, Emmy time, shoot me an email, and I'll send out the good news on the podcast.
Yeah, I definitely will take you up on that.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Meg. avgearguide.com, a member of the Association of Moving Image Archivists, specializes in film and video restoration. We use state-of-the-art technology to bring new life to vintage material, like the Lost Betty White series Pet Set, which we recently restored for its 50th anniversary return to air. We can apply the same technology to your documentary, film and video archive, and your family videos and photos. Mention the name of the TV Writer Podcast and get 10% off your order. And if you want to make some money, we also give cash for referrals. Visit avgearguide.com for details. DrivingFootage.com provides 4K 9-angle driving plates for film and television. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with more areas coming soon. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots and second-unit photography. Visit DrivingFootage.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person video interviews to you. Make sure to subscribe on all of the places you can find this podcast: Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, the TVWriterPodcast.com site, or also at scriptmag.com, and now also on Pandora. And if you're on Instagram, please follow at TV Writer Podcast. Please do follow me on Twitter. At Gray Jones is my handle. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do it for as little as 25 cents per episode. You can find out how you can become a patron of the podcast or a sponsor of the podcast at tvwriterpodcast.com/support.